The Tacoma rain tapped a steady beat against the foggy windows of the Whitaker house on April 5th, Sophie Bennett's 18th birthday, a gray drizzle that blurred the world outside as the rare, rich scent of chocolate cake drifted from the kitchen. Her mom, Carol Whitaker, never baked, not even for Thanksgiving, so this was a curveball, a quiet signal something was off that Sophie couldn't shake. She sprawled on the couch in her faded flannel PJs, scrolling through a handful of happy birthday texts from friends, her phone buzzing with emojis, her mind half lost in the glow of the screen, when her dad, David Whitaker, called out from the living room, his voice cutting sharp through the morning haze, the same cold edge he'd used when she'd knocked over his coffee mug at 8 and got a week of silent treatment. "Sophie, come here," he said, not looking up from the armchair, his hands clasped tight, while Carol sat on the couch, eyes glued to her lap, her lips a thin, nervous line. Something big had shifted, and Sophie's gut twisted as she shuffled in, barefoot, her messy bun bobbing with each step. "Sit down," David ordered, and she dropped onto the ottoman, confused but steady. She'd learned years ago to lock her feelings down around them. Tears only made it worse. Then they hit her with it, blunt as a hammer. Carol's voice flat. "You're adopted, Sophie. We took you in when you were 2. Your birth mom couldn't handle you." David jumping in. "We did what we could, gave you a life." And Carol finishing, cold. "You're 18 now. Time to find your own way." David reached under the couch, sliding a beat-up duffel bag across the scratched hardwood. Green canvas, stuffed with a couple shirts and a thin wad of cash. "There's enough there for a hostel downtown till you get a job," he said, like he was handing her a grocery list, not a life sentence. Sophie froze, her breath catching, but she didn't cry, didn't yell, just stood slow, gripping the bag's strap till her knuckles whitened, and nodded, her voice steady. "Thank you," a small smile flickering across her face. They didn't catch it, didn't see the steel in her eyes, the spark they'd missed. Because what they didn't know, what they couldn't have guessed, was that 3 weeks back, Sophie had found the letter, tucked deep in David's desk drawer under old receipts, an envelope addressed to Dr. Marina Costas, a birth certificate inside with her name, Sophie Bennett, and Marina's listed as mother, no father, a secret she'd been chasing ever since. This wasn't her end, folks. This was her start, a birthday bombshell she'd turn into a reckoning. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell right now. This Tacoma tale's just kicking off, and it's packed with twists that'll grab you by the throat. America, don't miss a second! The Tacoma night pressed heavy and damp against the thin walls of the hostel on Pike Street, a grim little box where Sophie Bennett crashed after her 18th birthday blew up, rain drumming the roof, the air sour with bleach and stale cigarette smoke, her back jammed against the wall as she clutched that green duffel bag, like it was all she had left in the world. Inside, it wasn't much. 2 faded t-shirts, a pair of jeans, $50 in crumpled bills, and the real prize, a yellowed envelope she'd dug out of David Whitaker's desk 3 weeks back, hidden under a stack of old tax returns, like a landmine waiting to blow. She'd found it by accident, looking for a stapler, drawer sticking, paper spilling, and there it was, addressed to Dr. Marina Costas, in a shaky scrawl, a birth certificate folded inside with Sophie's name typed clean, Sophie Bennett, born April 5, 2007, mother listed as Marina Costas, father blank, a jagged tear where the truth should have been. Her breath had caught that day, the house silent around her, David at work, Carol out, and she'd bolted to the Tacoma Public Library, her sneakers slapping wet pavement, her mind racing faster than her feet. The library was her refuge, all quiet stacks and free Wi-Fi, and she'd torn into the archives, old newspapers flickering on a screen, a 2005 headline screaming loud, "Local psychiatrist Marina Costas committed after fraud claims against Whitaker Health Institute." A grainy photo of Marina, dark hair framing fierce eyes, hands cuffed outside Willow Creek Psychiatric Facility. Her story spilling out in black ink. She'd accused Dr. Paul Kendrick, head of Whitaker Health, of running illegal experiments on patients, abuse covered up as therapy. But the state called her unstable, locked her away, case closed. Sophie's hands shook as she printed the article, the librarian's side eye ignored. Then another dot connected, sharp and cold. David's name, scrawled on donation letters to Whitaker Health she'd seen in his study, brushed off as charity when she was a kid fetching printer paper. That night in the hostel, sprawled on a lumpy cot, the envelope open beside her, Sophie traced the certificate's edges. Marina wasn't some deadbeat who'd ditched her. She'd been silenced, taken, and David was tied to it. His clean suits and clipped voice hiding something rotten. Sleep wouldn't come, the ceiling cracked and stained, shadows shifting like ghosts. Marina's face burned behind her eyes. A mother she'd never met. A fight she'd never known, now hers to pick up. She didn't have a plan yet, just a name and a hunch. But as the rain pounded harder, Sophie felt it. A fire catching. A thread pulling tight between her and a woman locked away. A truth David and Carol thought they'd buried deep. The Tacoma dawn crept in slow and cold on April 6th, a thin, ghostly mist curling off the cracked streets, wrapping the city in a damp shroud as Sophie Bennett slipped out of the Pike Street hostel before the first rays could pierce the gloom, her breath puffing white in the sharp air, the chill slicing through her thin hoodie and stinging her cheeks like a warning she couldn't ignore. She'd barely slept, the hostel's lumpy cot creaking under her restless weight, the air thick with bleach and the stale tang of cigarette smoke seeping through the walls. Her mind replaying that yellowed envelope, the birth certificate, and Marina Costas's name like a drumbeat she couldn't silence. That green duffel bag hung heavy on her shoulder. Her lifeline now, stuffed with 2 faded t-shirts, a pair of jeans fraying at the cuffs, $50 in crumpled bills she'd counted twice, and the folded truth she'd carried since yesterday. Her real mother, locked away somewhere. A secret David and Carol Whitaker thought they'd buried deep. Her sneakers slapped the wet pavement hard, a steady rhythm cutting through the quiet as she trekked back to the Tacoma Public Library, her sanctuary of worn books and free Wi-Fi, the only place she'd ever felt safe enough to think straight. Her locker there held a microfilm reel she'd stashed last week, articles about Marina's fight against Whitaker Health Institute, her cuff snapping shut outside Willow Creek Psychiatric Facility, her voice drowned by a system that labeled her crazy. She needed more. Where was Marina now? So she stopped at a payphone outside the library's stone steps, the metal cold against her palm, quarters clinking loud as she dialed public records offices, mental health departments, her voice steady but desperate. Ever hear of Willow Creek? Patients moved anywhere? Most cut her off. No record, kid. Their tones flat, bored, until a clerk in Olympia, an older woman with a voice soft as worn flannel, paused long enough to listen. Some got shipped to Pine Hollow Care Center in Ashwood, she said, hesitating. 3 hours north, late 90s, no public list, but a few are still kicking around there. Sophie's heart lurched, a jolt of hope spiking through the fog. She scribbled Pine Hollow Ashwood on the envelope's corner with a stubby pencil, but her cash was dust, the $50 eaten up by hostel nights and library printouts, every dime gone before she could blink. She glanced across 4th Avenue, the neon flicker of a diner catching her eye. Help wanted glowing red through the mist, and crossed the street fast, her hoodie damp, her stomach growling from a day without food. Inside, the air smelled of grease and burnt coffee. The manager, Tony, a big guy with a smoker's rasp and a face like weathered leather, leaned on the counter, eyeing her up. Dark circles under her eyes, hands fidgeting with the bag strap. Need a job? He grunted, and she nodded quick. Dishes, floors, anything, I'll work hard. Her voice firm despite the shake in her legs. 6 a.m. tomorrow, don't be late, he said, tossing her an apron. And for 5 days straight, she scrubbed pots till her knuckles bled, the scalding water searing her skin, the cracked soap stinging cuts she didn't bother bandaging. Every clink of a plate, every slosh of suds a step closer to Ashwood, her arms aching but her will iron. On the 6th morning, Tony slid her $120, tips and pay, a thin stack of bills she clutched like gold. And she bolted to the Tacoma bus station, the clock ticking 10:50 a.m., the Ashwood line rolling out at 11 sharp. The ride was a quiet blur. 3 hours north, the window streaking with rain, skeletal towns flashing by, their storefronts boarded up, frost clinging to the edges despite spring's promise. Sophie sat alone, the envelope pressed inside her jacket, her fingers tracing Marina's name through the fabric, every mile tightening the thread between them. Pine Hollow Care Center loomed atop a hill in Ashwood by mid-afternoon, its peeling sign half swallowed by gnarled pines, the building sagging like it was tired of standing. She pushed through the double doors, the air inside hitting her with a stale punch of antiseptic and dust. The desk nurse barely looking up, her glasses perched low, a clipboard in her bony grip. "I'm here to visit Marina Costas," Sophie said, her voice steady despite the hammering in her chest, the words she'd rehearsed 100 times spilling out. "I'm her daughter." The nurse blinked slow, her tired eyes narrowing like she was sizing up a ghost. Then she sighed, scratching something on the clipboard. "She don't get visitors, never has. Down the hall, second door left. Keep it short, kid." Her tone clipped, dismissive. But Sophie was already moving, her sneakers silent on the chipped linoleum, her pulse roaring as she reached the door, its creak slicing the stillness like a blade. Inside, a small room glowed dim with afternoon light. A frail woman sat by a window, gray streaks threading her dark hair, hands folded tight in her lap, her thin frame hunched but alive. And as Marina Costas turned, her eyes locked on Sophie's. Sharp, deep, a mirror of her own. A spark flared between them, a truth stretching across 18 years, ready to break free and burn everything down. The late afternoon light spilled weak and golden through the grimy window of Pine Hollow Care Center, casting long shadows across a small, sterile room in Ashwood, where Sophie Bennett stood frozen in the doorway, her sneakers squeaking soft on the chipped linoleum, her breath catching as the air hit her lungs, thick with antiseptic, dust, and something heavier, like time itself had settled into the walls. She'd made it, 3 hours on a rattling bus from Tacoma, 5 days scrubbing diner pots, till her hands bled, all for this moment. And now, there she was, Dr. Marina Costas, her mother, sitting by that window, a frail figure etched against the fading day, her dark hair streaked with gray, her thin hands folded tight in her lap like she was holding herself together. Sophie's heart hammered, a wild thud against her ribs, as she stepped inside, the creak of the door slicing the silence like a knife. Marina turned slow, her head tilting, and those eyes locked on Sophie's, sharp, deep, alive, a mirror of her own, cutting through 18 years of lies in a single, electric beat. "Marina," Sophie said, her voice trembling but sure, the name she'd traced on that envelope 100 times now, real, alive. "I'm Sophie, your daughter." Marina's gaze flickered, recognition sparking, then pain, a raw edge glinting in the depths, and she exhaled soft, her whisper rasping out like it hadn't been used in years. "They still watch me. I remember everything." Sophie dropped to her knees beside the chair, the cold floor biting through her jeans, her words spilling fast. "They told me you were unfit, David and Carol, said you couldn't handle me. But I found the articles. I know you exposed Whitaker Health. I know they took you away." Marina's hands clenched, knuckles whitening, her voice dropping lower, a hiss barely above the hum of the room. "It wasn't just exposure. Experimental drugs, isolation cells, memory wipes, they called it PTSD therapy, but it was control. Breaking women no one would miss. Paul Kendrick ran it, built Whitaker Health on their screams. Your father, David, he buried it, buried me." Sophie's knees buckled under the weight. David Whitaker, the man who'd handed her a duffel bag and a hostel key, wasn't just a donor to some shady charity. He'd sealed Marina's fate, stolen her daughter, raised her like a trophy in his clean Tacoma house. "I tried to stop them," Marina rasped, her eyes darting to the corners of the ceiling, searching shadows for ghosts. "Filed reports with the state, screamed till my throat bled. Then they came, said I was unstable, locked me in Willow Creek till it closed, shipped me here. I begged to keep you, Sophie, but they'd already decided I was too loud, too dangerous." Her voice cracked, a fracture in the steel she'd forged, and Sophie's chest tightened. 18 years of silence, of lies, unraveling in this dim room. She reached out, her hand hovering near Marina's, but footsteps echoed down the hall, sharp and sudden. A nurse in crisp white pushed the door wide, her smile thin as a blade. Visiting hours are over, time to go. Cutting the air between them. Marina's grip shot out, fast and fierce, clamping Sophie's wrist. They'll come for you too, they always do. Her eyes wide, wild, a mother's warning carved in fear. Sophie stood, legs shaky, as the nurse stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. You're not the first asking about her, kid. The last girl didn't come back. The words landing like a punch, a shadow stretching beyond this room. Sophie pulled free, her pulse roaring, and stumbled into the hall, the nurse's stare boring into her back, Marina's whisper echoing in her skull. Outside, under a bare oak tree, the ashwood wind cut sharp, her breath fogging as she sank onto a splintered bench. She wasn't just finding a mom. She'd cracked open a cage, a conspiracy with teeth, and David's hands were as dirty as Kendrick's, her so-called father, a jailer in a suit. Marina wasn't lost. She was a prisoner, and Sophie wasn't walking away. She was stepping into a fight that had been waiting 18 years to explode. The ashwood dusk settled cold and heavy over Pine Hollow Care Center, the sky bruising purple, as Sophie Bennett stumbled out of Marina Costas's room, her sneakers dragging on the chipped linoleum, her mind reeling from her mother's whispered truth. Experimental drugs, memory wipes, David Whitaker's hands deep in the filth of Whitaker Health Institute, and that nurse's parting hiss echoing like a gunshot. The last girl didn't come back. Her breath fogged in the sharp air as she sank onto a splintered bench under a bare oak, the wind slicing through her hoodie, her hands trembling around that green duffel bag, still holding the envelope, the birth certificate, now heavier with Marina's pain. She couldn't go back to Tacoma, couldn't face David's clean lies or Carol's tight-lipped silence, not after this. So she trekked down the hill to a motel off Ashwood's main drag, its neon vacancy sign buzzing faint. The room she rented smelling of mildew and cracked dreams. $20 of her diner cash gone in a blink. That night, sprawled on a sagging mattress, the walls peeling like old skin, Sophie scoured the internet on her phone. Whitaker Health's site glowed with polished lies, healing women in crisis, retreats with smiling faces. But tax filings she dug up told a different story. David Whitaker's name buried in the fine print. A director signing off on research assets when Willow Creek shut in '99, a cover-up stretching back to her birth. Marina's words, "They'll come for you too," looped in her skull, and that last girl haunted her, a shadow she couldn't shake. So she hunted for the nurse, Lena Carter, on Facebook, a profile sparse but alive, a comment from years back. Still at Pine Hollow, that haunted wreck. Sophie typed fast, her thumbs shaky. "I'm Marina's daughter, met you today. Help me expose them," and hit send, expecting silence, the motel's hum filling the void. At 2 a.m., her phone buzzed. Lena's reply, short, sharp. "Midnight, back entrance. Say you're lost if caught." And Sophie's pulse kicked up, a lifeline in the dark. The next night, the ashwood wind howled fierce, cutting through her jacket like it wanted her gone. She crept along the gravel path behind Pine Hollow, frost crunching underfoot, the building looming silent under a sliver of moon. No cars, no voices, just shadows stretching long and thin. The maintenance door creaked open before she could knock. Lena Carter stood there, still in scrubs, her face taut, her eyes darting like she'd seen too much. "You came," she said, voice low, and Sophie nodded. "I had to." Lena waved her in quick. "Keep it quiet. Some cameras are dead, not all," and led her down a narrow service hall, flickering bulbs casting jagged light, past a break room with a stale coffee pot into a records room lined with rusty filing cabinets, the air thick with dust and secrets. "I shouldn't be here," Lena whispered, unlocking a drawer with a brass key, her hands unsteady. "But I saw what they did to your mom, to the others, and when that last girl showed up, I thought maybe someone would finally listen." She pulled a worn file, handed it over. "Claire Evans, journalism student, '09, came from Marina, dug up court docs, Got too close. Second visit, her dorm was trashed, laptop gone, files wiped. She told a friend she was followed, then vanished. Cops called it voluntary, but I don't buy it. Sophie flipped the pages. Claire's photo stared back, young, fierce, a ghost in the margins. Then Marina's file, notes stamped red. Unfit, delusional. But a handwritten report signed M. Costas screamed different. Unauthorized drug trials, no consent. Whitaker Health's logo smeared across every lie. They crushed her for this, Lena said, voice breaking. Sane one day, committed the next after she filed with the state. Sophie's stomach twisted. David didn't just adopt her. He'd taken her as proof they'd won. And then Lena reached into her pocket, pressed a USB into Sophie's palm. Memos, patient logs, Marina's reports. Use it smart. Don't come back. Sophie nodded, the drive cold against her skin. But as she turned to leave, Lena grabbed her arm. Claire wasn't the running type. Neither are you. Watch your back. They've got eyes everywhere. The maintenance door shut behind her with a dull thud, the night swallowing her steps as she bolted down the hill, the USB a live wire in her fist. She wasn't just a daughter anymore. She was a spark in a powder keg, and Whitaker Health's house of cards was about to catch fire. The Tacoma skyline was a faint smudge in Sophie Bennett's rearview mind as she holed up in a 24-hour diner 2 towns south of Ashwood, the fluorescent lights buzzing harsh overhead, the air thick with grease and burnt coffee, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug she couldn't afford. $2 left from her diner cash, the USB from Lena Carter, a cold weight in her pocket, its secrets humming like a live grenade. She'd bolted from Pine Hollow after midnight, the nurse's warning. They've got eyes everywhere. And Marina's grip. They'll come for you too, driving her to this nowhere spot, her green duffel bag slumped beside her. The motel too risky now with her name on the register. The USB held it all. Patient logs of sedation trials, memos signed by David Whitaker ordering Marina's confinement, videos of her mother strapped to a chair, Paul Kendrick's voice cooing lies, and Claire Evans's name, flagged for escalation before she vanished. Sophie's phone was dead, battery drained from frantic searches, so she trekked to a pawn shop at noon, trading her last $30 for a beat-up Chromebook, its keys sticky, its screen scratched, then hauled it to the Tacoma Public Library, her old refuge, sinking into a corner behind dusty biographies to plug in the drive. The files loaded slow, 3 agonizing minutes, then spilled open. Patient MK, reputational threat, maintain status quo. David's digital signature stark against the screen. Videos from 2005, Marina slurring, "You're helping me forget." Kendrick's calm slicing through the static, not therapy, but programming. A machine built to erase. Sophie's hands shook, rage boiling hot under her skin. They'd stolen her mother, her life, and David had raised her in the shadow of that lie. His beige coat and clipped voice, a mask for a monster. She fired the files off. Reddit threads, indie journalists, a whistleblower podcast she'd heard once. Most ignored her, their inboxes cold. But Grace Turner, a disgraced reporter fired for chasing medical scandals, bit back fast. "I've waited 15 years for this. Where are you?" Sophie met her 3 hours later at a cabin near Olympia, pines thick as secrets swallowing the dirt road. Grace, early 50s, sharp-eyed, wind-worn, stood on the porch, no smile, just a nod. "Show me." Inside, she locked the door, pulled a dusty laptop from a trunk, and scrolled the USB's folders, her breath catching at Claire's name. She called me, scared, said she was followed. I couldn't save her. Then clicked a video, Marina's empty eyes filling the screen, Grace's jaw clenching. "This is real. We drop it everywhere, or you're next." They mailed copies to 6 allies, prosecutors, podcasters, an underground leak site, passwords sent via burner calls, Grace's voice low. "Make it too big to bury." Then Sophie's phone buzzed, a voicemail from David, his tone smooth, controlled. "Sophie, I know what you're doing. Let's talk. You owe me that." Grace snapped, "Don't go." But Sophie had to. needed to see his face crack. She met him at Tacoma's old train station, half abandoned, cameras rolling from a distance, witnesses milling nearby. He stood there, beige coat pristine, fatherly smile plastered on. "You've grown clever, Sophie," but she cut him off, voice steel. "Don't pretend you raised me out of love." His mask flickered, a crack showing. "You think this was simple? I didn't want this." And she fired back, cold. "You wanted control." He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Everything you found, it's dangerous. For you, for Marina. Stop this, and it ends quiet." Sophie held her ground, heart pounding. "It's already out." And his calm peeled away, something icy underneath. "This will destroy you, too." She turned, voice low. "It frees me," and walked off, his shadow shrinking behind her as the station's hum swallowed his silence. 2 days later, the leak hit. A podcast dropped Marina's slurred audio, raw and unfiltered. Articles flooded X, scans of falsified files trending. Claire's name broke wide, an anonymous exposé tying it all to Whitaker Health. Silver Birch trended by nightfall, the state attorney general announcing subpoenas within a week. David's name pinned next to Kendrick's in a class action suit from ex-patients' families. Grace kept Sophie hidden, the cabin a bunker as the media storm raged. But Sophie's mind stayed on Pine Hollow, Marina still caged, and she whispered to Grace over a flickering lamp, "I'm getting her out before they silence her for good." The reckoning wasn't just breaking, it was roaring, and Sophie wasn't stopping till every wall Whitaker built came crashing down. The Olympia dusk hung soft and golden over Grace Turner's pine-shrouded cabin, the air humming with crickets as Sophie Bennett stood on the creaky porch, her green duffel bag slung loose at her side, the USB's fallout still roaring across the country, Whitaker Health Institute trending on X, David Whitaker's name pinned in subpoenas, Marina's slurred voice from those videos looping on every podcast from Seattle to D.C. It had been 5 days since the leak broke, a wildfire Grace had fanned with her network of prosecutors and whistleblowers, and now the state attorney general's office was digging, class action suits piling up from families of women broken by Kendrick's experiments. But Sophie's eyes were locked north, back to Ashwood, to Pine Hollow Care Center, where Marina Costas sat caged, her frail frame and fierce spirit a tether Sophie couldn't cut. "I'm getting her out," she told Grace that morning, voice steady over a chipped mug of instant coffee, the cabin's lamp flickering. "They'll silence her if this gets hotter." Grace nodded, sharp eyes glinting. "Staff's rattled since the news hit, some have quit," and made a call, her low voice barking orders to an old contact. By dusk, they were on the road, the pickup's tires crunching gravel, Sophie's hands twisting the duffel strap. Grace's jaw set as they sped toward Ashwood under a sky bleeding red. Pine Hollow loomed quiet when they pulled up, its peeling sign swaying in the wind, the parking lot half empty. No news vans yet, just shadows and a jittery stillness. Lena Carter met them at the back entrance, her scrubs wrinkled, her face pale under the moonlight. She slipped Sophie a clipboard. "Marina's sedated but awake. Move fast, they're watching closer now." Her voice a tight whisper as she waved them in, the service hall dim, bulbs flickering like a dying pulse. Sophie bolted to the room, her sneakers silent on the linoleum, pushing the door open to that same window, that same chair. Marina sat there, gray-streaked hair falling loose, her hands trembling, but her eyes snapping to Sophie's, alive, unbroken. "Mom," Sophie whispered, kneeling fast, her throat tight. "We're leaving right now." Marina's gaze softened, a frail hand brushing Sophie's cheek. "You found me." Her voice raspy but warm, tears brimming after 18 years dry. Grace stood guard at the door, nodding sharp. "Clear." And Sophie helped Marina up, her mother's frame light as a bird, her steps shaky but sure. They slipped out, no alarms, no white coats, just the dusk light washing them free, Lena's shadow fading behind as she locked the door. The next weeks blurred. Grace's contacts secured a safe house in Tacoma, a small apartment with peeling paint, but a lock that worked. A pro bono lawyer filed for Marina's release, citing the leak. A trauma doc checked her over, weaning her off sedatives, her memory patchy but sharpening every day. David's trial loomed. Indicted with Kendrick, his calls stopped cold. And Sophie sat with Marina on a sagging couch, flipping through the envelope's papers. Marina's handwritten report from '05, now a weapon that had torn Whitaker Health apart. Grace kept digging, her laptop glowing late into the night. And 6 months later, a tip came. Hannah Lee, once Claire Evans, found alive in an Idaho trailer park, living under a fake name, her eyes wary but bright when Sophie flew out to meet her. They sat on a rickety porch, Tacoma rain a distant memory, and talked for hours, not of loss, but of fight, of building something new. Hannah's voice steady. They thought they'd erased us, but here we are. Back in Tacoma, Sophie stood with Marina at a community vigil, candles flickering for Willow Creek's lost, her mother's hand firm in hers. David's legacy was ash, Whitaker Health a ghost, and Sophie's 18th birthday betrayal had forged a bond stronger than steel. The apartment's new sign read Safe Haven, a refuge for survivors. And as Marina smiled, small, real, Sophie knew this wasn't just freedom. It was a reckoning, a life reclaimed from lies, a fire that had burned the past to light the future. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, folks. This Tacoma Tale's wrapped with grit and heart, but we've got more stories of truth and triumph coming your way.